Greetings everyone, my name is Greg. In this video I am going to talk about the idea of programming, how all of us are to some degree or another programmed. And before I get into the heart of this subject, there was a question that was asked to me and it didn't bother me. I want to say that right from the start. Questions don't bother me. And this one was one that, while it didn't come from a Christian or theist, to use that term, it was one along the lines of what would be the type of thing you would hear them say. That being, if we are programmed, does that mean there's a programmer? My response to it was absolutely not, because genetics is not a programmer in the sense of a deity. The genetic makeup that somebody has, I don't think that's where your personality comes from. The personality is developed after a child is born. The first thing that a child is born with, in a sense the only thing that a child is born with, is what Sigmund Freud called the id. It is the part of the self that is, I want what I want and I want it now. That is all a child knows at birth is what it wants, and one of, I want what I want and I want it now. Sigmund Freud had described three different parts of a personality. There is the id, there is the ego, and there is the superego. The ego is the idea we have of ourselves. A person's ego may be inaccurate as far as how they actually are, but it's only how they see themselves. Where the superego is basically, that's the lawmaker. That's the part of us that is, I guess you could say, it's where the conscience is also located. Now, the conscience becomes an interesting thing to consider when you take into consideration people that are sociopaths. Because a sociopath, by, to use the term genetics, they have no conscience. It's very strange. It is a defect in the brain. It could be termed a chemical imbalance, but I think there is a genetic factor that plays a role in this. Because someone like Richard Kuklinski, I know I had mentioned him before, he became known as the Iceman. He wasn't as much a serial killer, even though he killed a lot of people, as much as he was a mob hitman. But the thing with him that is interesting is he was genetically predisposed to being just what he was. The genetic, even if putting aside the abusive family he had been born into, even without that, genetically he had the predisposition towards being a sociopath. That doesn't necessarily mean that a person will become one just because they're genetically predisposed to it. The thing is, when you combine that with like an abusive childhood, abusive parents, the one it can lead into and further shape or program someone to acting out in that manner. It is what raises the question of how much of our choices are part of the genetic programming that we have, as well as the programming or conditioning that comes from growing up in a particular family. And I'll use myself as an example because that's the only thing I really can for me. I grew up in a Christian family, so initially I had that Christian programming as part of what my parents were trying to instill. But what could also be part of me that I can't totally rule out is the aspect of did I have a genetic predisposition towards theology and deep thought because my grandfather was a Lutheran minister? I don't know. It is something that I find interesting because a good friend of mine is extremely mechanical. But when you look at his family, as I have, his father was also extremely mechanical. And it leads me to think I don't know his family tree to know other ancestors, but just in what he would have seen role modeled, the mechanics was part of it. But that's where it differs with me. Because even though my parents were quote unquote Christians, they would go to church every Sunday, but as far as cracking a Bible at home, no. They wouldn't do it. And when I started to question things at the age of 16, they became concerned because they were seeing me do something that they had never role modeled to me. That being, I was opening a Bible and I was openly reading the Bible. I was making no bones about it. I also started watching a guy on TV that went, and he was the pastor of a church called Shepherd's Chapel. I found him very interesting, and I liked his style because he would go through the Bible verse by verse, line by line, and he would also talk about different study tools like a Strong's Concordance and other books that I had utilized. There was one called Biblical Mathematics that I regard now as crap. However, it was something that at the time I looked into it and I thought it was very interesting. But I also had what was called a companion Bible because it had appendixes in the back for deeper study of various subjects. That was basically before the aspect of computers really took on what they have become. Now, what I encourage people to utilize is the eSword. It's a free download and it enables you to fact check what any Christian tries to claim. Because a lot of times they will be, if not totally twisting something, they'll definitely be taking it out of context. If not straight up changing what's actually there. The thing is, I didn't have in my family the philosophical to deep thought role modeled. What I had role modeled from my dad from a very young age is a workaholic. It was something that when I became a young adult, I recognized the impulse in me to basically be a workaholic and to have what is termed a strong or a good work ethic. And at the time, I rebelled. And it was one of, I knew what my impulse to do was, which was to work my ass off. And the way I, in a sense, rebelled against that was to go the other extreme. That's where I would just get a bug up my ass about a company and be, you know what, I quit. And I would float, and I would just, it was a very immature period of my life, and it was one I was trying very hard not to be like my dad. It was something that it took me basically growing up and, in a sense, going into the military for them to reinstill that type of mindset. It wasn't hard for the military to do because that base idea was already back here. It was just one that I had intentionally suppressed, that I was trying to basically rewrite my programming. The thing is, we can't rewrite our programming. When I walked away from Christianity at the age of 24, that was the result of, to a point, rewriting my programming. I realized that there were things in Christianity that I could not go along with. Even though at the time I believed that God existed, now I see no evidence to believe that. One could still exist. There's just no evidence to believe it. The thing is, I rewrote the programming that came from my parents. And it took a lot of years. For those that are teenagers, that you may have grown up in a religious family and been taught, or some could use the term brainwashed, into believing different things about God, Jesus, so forth. I'm not trying to say by the aspect of that that we're all programmed, that you are a slave to your programming. You're not. You can change and rewrite your own programming. It takes time. It takes a very focused effort. The thing is, it can also be done, while it can be done in a positive way, it can also be done in a negative way. So someone can program you, you can program someone else. It is all a matter of to what degree do they give you control over their life. And there are techniques that are utilized by different cults. Cults are a big area where basically programming or brainwashing can take place. But another big area where I wouldn't use the term brainwashing as much as, to a point, mind control for a period of time and behavioral control, is the military. Before I went into the Army, I knew part of what they would try to do, which is tear someone down to build them back up and so forth. And I was aware that they would try and do this. I was also well aware And it's probably a genetic part, if not, because I don't see how I could change what I term my beast. Now, that is a part of me that I do feel largely came from my childhood. Growing up with a verbally abusive mother, my beast, as I term it, is a very hostile, very aggressive side of me. One that will tear into somebody and tear their head off without even thinking about it. It is one of the things that when I first started using YouTube or making videos on YouTube, that I was a lot less, I had a lot less control over my beast. In large part, I let it run free. And it really took my being in the military for me to learn how to control that side of me. Because it's me. It is just a vicious, heartless side. One that was born out of pain, anger, and the verbally abusive. It is also, I think, where my impulse to use the term of when I'm dealing with people, and you might have seen it if you look at the conversations I've had with people, my impulse to use the term of moron, stupid, idiot, things like that. Terms like that were tossed around a lot by my mom. So it's one, and I'm not saying this to excuse it, only to, in a sense, cast light on it. Because it is part of the base programming that I have. Can I change it? I can, and I'm trying. But it's a very gradual process. Much like the aspect of if you're trying to change someone else, and another area where programming does come into play. For those that are teenagers, you would definitely not know what I'm talking about here when I say the aspect of, or I would hope you wouldn't, the aspect of the slave-master relationship. For those that are into the what's termed S&M, it's also called bondage. The bondage and discipline. That is not just it's not even so much a sexual style as it is a game or role playing and a lifestyle that some people choose to engage in. The thing is, the one that is letting themselves be in the position of being a submissive, they are willingly and intentionally letting whoever their quote-unquote master is control them. And a person can do things to change and shape someone's personality into being how they want. That things that they wouldn't ordinarily do. Because one of the things, as I was considering doing the video on this, I came across something and I was reading it, and it was about how a husband intentionally, even before he married his wife, he got her pregnant and then didn't marry her until after she had the child. So it was one of humiliating her type of mindset. And then, after they were married, over a period of years, he would do things to introduce, like bringing another man into the sexual situation. and doing things to. There was one point he had orchestrated his wife being gangbanged to the point where after like 15 years of marriage, she would have sex with anyone he said without hesitation. And that's the programming I'm talking about. That is a bit of an extreme in it. But it is the same type of thing. The same type and the same method that is utilized for that can be utilized for religion, can be utilized for anything where somebody wants to control another person. I'm going to do a video, my next video actually, will be on the subject of mind control. And I will go into more details on how mind control is done and show you how you can basically recognize when someone, or even advertising to a point, tries to get into mind control and programming. Because one of the things, you can watch commercials and you'll see this, is a pain pleasure message. Every commercial. Using their product, whatever product that they want to sell, whatever that is, they associate pleasure to it. And at the same time, not using their product, pain. Because one of the things that has been found psychologically is people will do far more to avoid pain than they will ever do to gain pleasure. So advertisers utilize this in order to try and manipulate a person into buying their product. I will bring this up and, in a sense, expose it, turn the light on it so you can see and so you're aware of what is being done. It is just like in commercials, and you can watch them do this. They'll act like using this other product that's different from what they're selling, that, oh, this is so difficult. Yet theirs, oh, this is so easy. It's the same type of pain and pleasure. It's just changing it to being, oh, look at how they're struggling. Look at how difficult that is. It's an aspect of bringing in, look at the pain. And then see how easy this is. See how much nicer this is. Pleasure. That's all that's about. And what you guys will also notice is I don't have the female in the background or side, but rather I have another. That is actually a thing of 3D art that I had done on IMVU. I had removed the background, changed the color, and so forth with those three skulls, which is the see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil, just taken in skulls aspect, and I loved that picture. I thought it was so cool. But it's something that I saw that in a black and white picture, and I wanted to, in a sense, give it more color because I think that enhances it. The thing is, it's all a matter of, now where my interest in skulls, dragons, so forth, this stuff comes from, I don't totally know. My dad flipped out when I got my first gargoyle because he was trying to say that they are satanic and so forth. And I had pointed out to him, if they're satanic, why are they mounted on churches in England? He shut up about the gargoyle subject for life. He won't talk to me about it. But by the same token, he will not even try to talk to me about religion. He's tried, and basically, after walking him and schooling him on what was in his Bible, he just basically ran away from that subject with me. And it's one of those, going back also to my dad. There was one point when I was a teenager, I was very hostile. I had a huge chip on my shoulder. There was one point, for whatever reason, I didn't want to go to school. He did something that basically I called his bluff. I was standing at the stairs and he grabbed me around my neck. I looked at him and with absolutely nothing but rage, I looked at him and said, "Go ahead, kill me. You'd be doing me a favor." He backed off. That quick, I knew I was dominant. When my mentor took over with me at 18, he was one that he had been in the military. So he was able to basically exert a type of control and alpha male that my dad just wouldn't do. And it was one that, while you may think that someone else exerting, basically taking an alpha stance, that there would be, in a sense, a fight, not necessarily. Because as a teenager, I wanted someone that would be able to, they had to be able to show me that they were stronger than me, to take the dominance from me. Because at that time, I wasn't ready. I didn't know how to control my own temper. I didn't know how to control myself. And it was a matter of, in a few years, my mentor had gotten me to a point where he had said, "You don't need me as a teacher anymore. You're ready to basically be teaching others." And at the time, I was like, "No, I still need you." But he knew, he could read me better than I could read myself. And he had died well over 10 years ago. It was that shook my world more than my mother dying when I was in my 20s. And because when my mom had gotten brain cancer, a brain tumor, I didn't care, to use the term. I mean, there was one point going back from the hospital after she had 4 seizures one night. I remember I was driving and I heard on the radio the song "Dust in the Wind" came up, and it was just, I liked that song, but it was unemotional, cold. And with my mom, there came a point where she needed help getting on and off the toilet and so forth. Even though I physically had the strength, I couldn't do it psychologically. Because I think the bottom line with that was, a part of me didn't want to. A bigger part of me didn't want to than did, type of thing. Because there was one point my dad had said to me after my mom died, do you regret anything and so forth. I looked at him and he looked at me like I was a cold-hearted son of a bitch. When I said to him, no amount of shoulda, coulda, wouldas will change 1 second of the past. So why worry about it? Why think about it? The truth of the matter is, do I regret anything with my mom? No. Because given where I was with my own programming from my childhood, where I was at psychologically and all of that, I couldn't have reacted any differently. I just couldn't. And at this point in my life, I understand. My mom wasn't trying to be abusive and so forth. She was only doing the only thing she knew how to do. That was a difficult place for me to reach here. Because I found out years after she died that her father, the Lutheran minister, was not only verbally abusive, he was physically abusive. And finding that out really helped me to understand she was just following the cycle. And she didn't know enough to know the cycle of abuse. I had researched this stuff. And yes, I recognized within myself the beast that I had. But I also read and researched and found out abuse runs in cycles. If you are verbally abused, you will, as a reflex, be verbally abusive. If you are physically abused, you will, as a reflex, be physically abusive. The same is true if you're sexually abused. The impulse will be there to act out in that same manner. It doesn't mean you can't control it, that you can't stop it, but I'll tell you from my own experience, with the verbal abuse, stopping it, fighting it, is a son of a bitch. It will be the biggest, to use the term demon, that you will ever face. The biggest obstacle or the biggest enemy that I have in my life is me. I had used the term when I was a kid, real little kid, 9, 10 years old, of there's two sides of me. There's the boy and there's the beast. The boy will love you to death, the beast will tear you apart. And I identified as a very little kid with the Hulk. I understood it because one of the things I heard a lot when I was growing up was guys don't cry. That crap was pounded into my head at a very young age. And it is something that even now at 44, being aware of this, I very rarely will cry. I've gone years and so forth not crying. Even if I am hurt, cry? No. Anger, rage, I'll growl. There was one point as a teenager, I was in a farm accident and I was crushed for a little bit between a hay wagon and a corn crib. The friends of mine that were with me at the time, they said I sounded like an animal because I let out a roar. Didn't cry. I roared. I was angry instantly. And the doctor had said that basically I was damn lucky my leg didn't break, because it was one of those, it was being pushed. The hay wagon was pushing one direction and the corn crib pushing another. And they attributed it to the doctor at least attributed it to the strength in my calf muscle, that it absorbed most of the shock. The thing is, all of this, what I term my beast, it is the violent side. Basically, because as a child, as with all of us, there's two reactions. One of two reactions you will do when you are in a situation of danger: fight or flight. You will either fight or you will run. Those are your only options. That's it. You either are somebody that by instinct will be, I'm gonna fight, or you'll be someone that gets the hell out of Dodge. Neither one is wrong. It is just a different way of coping. And this is the type of thing that I want to bring to everyone's attention. Because when you're aware of these things, you can see in yourself basically where your programming is, and areas where, okay, I see this part of how I've been programmed, and then all right, how do I go about changing that? And you would have to first identify what it is you want to change, and basically get the motivation in yourself to bring about the change. Because I know I could utilize this type of mindset to quit smoking. One of the ways, and I had listened to things that he had said, and there's a lot of value in it, is what Tony Robbins had said with personal power. Of if you associate more pain to something than pleasure, your brain will instinctively go away from it. That even though smoking is not quote unquote good for me, it is, and there could even be aspects of where it's harmful to me. Here, in my head, I associate more pleasure to smoking than to not. That's why I keep doing it. And the thing is, in order to change that, basically I have to flip it in my own head. I have to go within my own head to bring about the change that I would want. This is all, this type of thing there are so many examples that can be given. When you're dealing with something like cigarettes, though, you do have the aspect of the withdrawal from the chemical. And the same with things of like drug addiction. I would say if anyone is having an issue with drugs, seeking help is not weakness. It may be what you need at the time. And if you don't believe in a God and you want to seek help, and somebody wants to try and babble about one, or say that you need to utilize some bullshit higher power type of thinking, I look at it as if the ends justify the means. If going into that and basically going along with something can bring about a change that you want to do anyway, okay, fine. Utilize that for the period of time in order to affect the change in yourself, but be aware that you are the one doing it. The idea that you're powerless to something, no. You have the ability to control what you will go along with and what you won't. That is not a sign of weakness. That is a sign of strength. Do not let anyone try and tell you that basically that you're weak. No. They're trying to tear you down. Don't buy it. It is one of the things, and I'll close with this, because when I was in the Army, yes, there were a lot of points where they recognized the beast that was in me, and they wanted to use it. They wanted to tap it and try to control it to basically their ends. It never, I don't know if they never succeeded in that. The thing is, just because, and I lost my train of thought, so I'm going to let it be for now, and if I come across where it is, what it is, I'll mention that in my next video. The thing is, oh, I remember, the aspect of don't let anyone tear you down. When I was in the Army, I learned very quickly they will push you to where you think your limit is here, and they will push you past that, because your limit that you think of as being here, it's not here, it's up here. This is where basically you have discomfort, things hurt, but you can push past this. This is where you have muscle failure. This is where you absolutely physically can't do any more. And that will forever be climbing as you exert yourself more. And that is one of the things the military does instill, is realizing where you think your limit is, that's not your limit. Because one of the things they would do regularly is they would push us, I think it was like 3 times a week. They would smoke us to the point of muscle failure. Because that is where you're building muscle. Where you tear down the muscle, and then it rebuilds, and it grows and becomes stronger. So that the next time it takes more to hit muscle failure. And it does instill a cockiness and arrogance, but also a mindset of, I can do whatever I set my mind to. Nothing can stand in my way. It is something that I honestly feel everyone should do at least, I would say at least 4 years in the military. Be it like I did, National Guard or active duty. Because yes, there is aspects of mind control that come in with basic training. The overall, in the aspect of the ends justify the means, I think in many ways they do. But feel free to leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section. And remember, the aspect of being programmed Even though we are programmed from childhood and all through life, there's different programming that's trying to bombard us. You're in control of what you do and do not go along with. If something is wrong, do not hesitate to express that you feel something is wrong and express why you feel it is wrong. Do not be afraid to, in a sense, buck whatever programming. Because if something is right, people will be able to explain and show you why this is right. If they can't, then there's no reason for you to go along with it. But feel free to leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section. Later, people.